All right. Welcome, Mona, to the Fempreneur podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So excited to be here, Lindsay.
Awesome. Okay, so I have some really fun questions for you, but first let's do the basics. Where are you on the earth right now?
I am in the Bay Area of California, in a small town, St. Carlos, which, if you're not from around here, which I don't think you are, is about halfway between what was originally Silicon Valley down in San Jose and San Francisco.
Amazing. And so that's where you've been, hanging your hat for many, many years, or is that a newer place for you to be
I
living?
have been here for, just a little over 2 decades now. I'm originally Canadian.
Oh,
Yeah, raised in the Toronto area, and I've lived right across Canada. Literally, I've lived in 4 provinces. But I moved down here in 1999 at the peak of the first internet bubble and then subsequent crash, and I've been here ever since. I've experienced 3 bubbles and crashes here in Silicon Valley, and it's been a fascinating journey.
okay. Well, then tell us how you went from, working as an employee to having your own business, and at what point in time did that transition happen?
I've gone back and forth actually, from being an employee and having my own business a couple of times. I was running my own services business in Canada, working with tech companies before I moved down here. It was 1999, and the tech industry was sort of booming here, and has been really honestly ever since. And so came down here and joined a very large company here in Silicon Valley called Cadence Design Systems, which was a fantastic place to be for the period of time that I was there. Had a number of different roles there. And after a few different roles and a little trip to a different company for a while, as we were trying to raise their Series A, and then coming back to Cadence after that. My final role there was running acquisitions and strategic partnerships for Cadence. Um, but it was a great way to learn about uh, business in general, the software industry, the semiconductor and systems industry, basically all the industries that power the technology that we are surrounded with today. And at the same time, get to know an incredible number of other companies in the segments, because we were negotiating with like literally everybody. That After I finished that round, I decided to do a startup with a co-founder, and so did that again for a while. My prior startup was a services startup. This one was a product one. I actually just recently wrote about that experience, even though it was a decade ago, in a Fortune article that just got published recently. It was a everything that you would expect would be a fantastic startup. We used AI to automatically understand and tag video back like a decade ago, before that was a thing. And it seemed like, we had the perfect technology. We applied it to what I call the wrong audience and the wrong business opportunity. And while we had a lot of users, there wasn't a lot of people who wanted to pay for this product. We found our perfect product market fit, like we like to say in the startup world. There was possibly 2 areas. One was people who had a lot of adult videos on their computer, and I didn't want to be an expert there, and I didn't want to run a business that was focused on that. And the other one was professional sports, being able to automatically create highlight reels for professional sports teams, which sounds really awesome if you're in the professional sports world, but I wasn't. And so we ended up wrapping up that startup. And ever since then, I've been doing a combination of supporting, being an advisor for startups in the tech space, and being an executive operator at companies that are either startups or what we call scale ups, like getting ready to grow and eventually go public or get acquired.
Okay, I
Long,
want to talk about
long
your.
answer.
No, that's great. There's so many things you brought up that I want to dig into. We're going to talk about your book, Sail to Scale. But first, I want to talk about this recent publication that you've written about that experience. And I guess maybe you could just give us a little more of the meat from from that article, because I'm curious to know what your maybe top three takeaways were from that experience, and advice that you would give to others starting up a company similar to that one, maybe in the tech space.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the biggest takeaway, and we actually talk about this in the book also, the book is really a consolidation of myself and my co-authors' experience over between us all, probably 15 or, companies that we've started or worked at, along with stories that we got from, interviewing other founders and executives. There's just some basically common mistakes that companies make over and over again. And if we could all just realize that the same mistakes get made by different companies, perhaps we could learn from them and then avoid those mistakes. And there's other mistakes that companies make that are more specific to those companies. But if we could avoid the same ones, wouldn't we be much more efficient in being able to succeed? So one of the things that we talk about a lot in the book is assumptions. And I think that, what we did is we made some assumptions about our, opportunity and our focus area. One of the examples of assumptions is that, in the world of startups, you get the advice that you should get feedback from, your target audience in order to decide if this is like a product that would actually, work for an audience. And so we did that. We did everything that, I'd say sort of what I call flat, more pithy advice is that you get. We went out and we interviewed people in various different segments, and we created a survey and paid for a survey that we set out to like 1,000 people and segmentized it and got the feedback and everything. And what I'd say I learned from that whole experience, because we got a lot of good feedback and it was all very positive. But what I'd say from that experience is that one of the assumptions is that that is sufficient in order to understand what your target audience is, but it's not. The only way that you can really understand whether your target audience is going to like a product that you could actually turn commercial is if they give you money. And people don't talk about that enough. And so you have to be able to secure money from your target audience in order to prove that you've got product market fit. And we didn't go that far. So that was definitely one of the learnings, and what I often start saying to other startups that I advise now.
I love that. I think I've heard Tim Ferriss talk about something similar to that. Um, he said it a little differently, but I think that was the gist of it. He was basically like, you just don't know if someone's willing to pay for something until you have people that pay for it. So you have to basically say, um, the only way that I'm going to know is if you people pay for this. So I'm putting it out there. And this is the price, and this is part of my research. And just be honest with people, or don't be honest with them, I guess, and just put it out there and see what happens, and then decide if you're going to go big or
And
go.
there's definitely advice in that, but a lot of the advice is ask about their willingness to pay. Like, how much would they pay? And it's just not enough. I mean, I've just seen too many startups that haven't been able to continue to prove traction sufficiently to either grow on their own or sufficiently to be able to get investment to grow either way. Because willingness to pay is a fascinating concept, but it's all theoretical. Cash in hand is something different.
I love that. That's such a huge lesson. And oh my gosh. Yeah, I love that you're talking about that. So that would be you feel like that was your biggest lesson, and that's the one that you share with entrepreneurs over and over again.
That was a big one. And the other one that I think, and again, back to the adult videos versus professional sports teams. The other thing that I tell everybody and that we learned is that you really, I mean, you know, everybody talks about companies and hyper growth and growing fast, but the data shows that your average successful company takes about a decade to get to the point of being successful. It takes a while. Now, certainly, you know, the business, online business articles and journals will tell you, you know, how some things started in 2020 and now they're like worth $1 billion or more. But they talk about those because those are the outliers. And if your strategy is based on outliers, then I think that that's not a very strong strategy for you to have. If you look at the vast majority of companies, many of them fail, a large perspective, a number of them fail, but the ones that succeed take, you know, somewhere in the area of a decade to be able to grow to a significant standalone size. So if that is the case, and it is the case, the data shows that that's the case, then you really have to have a passion, a long-term passion for the problem that you're solving. One of the things we talk about we call this the launch phase or the launch wave of a company's journey, and we break up a company's journey into four waves in the book. But in the launch wave, we talk about that you really need to care deeply about the problem that you're solving, because if you're going to be involved in this for, on average, a decade, like it's really hard to keep at it, especially because there's always going to be some really, really, really rough times unless you are incredibly passionate about the problem that you're solving. And a lot of startups start by being passionate, and I'll admit we did this too, about the technology that they have, which is really being passionate about the solution in search of a problem.
Okay.
And that doesn't work because you have to be able to pivot if you need to pivot, right? So if
Yeah.
my passion was solving, being able to search and tag and organize and create highlight reels for professional sports videos, then perhaps that my technology was a solution. Perhaps there was another technology that was a better solution, but I would have stuck with it for a long time. It just wasn't my passion. And I was trying to fit a technology into a problem.
Right. Okay. Oh my gosh, this is really cool. I feel like you're coming into this thing. I wrote it down. I found it. Oh yeah, it was one of the questions that you like to answer. You're probably answering it already. The mastering the viable part of the minimum viable product. Is this tying into that at all, or
It's
talk?
an element of it. It's definitely an element of it. When I talk about the big takeaways from our startup experience, yeah, I don't really talk about that as much because I feel like it's been written so often in, you know, the world about a viable, minimum viable product. But I do think I've written about it in other articles that, again, in service of speed, which is what we've all learned has to happen, just throw it against the wall, see if it works, and then if it doesn't, then pivot quickly and then throw something else against the wall. We have forgotten what viable, the V is for viable. It's not for, I call it, it's not for version. It's not for version 0, it's not for version 1, it's not for version 2, it's for viable. And so we keep focusing on minimum in the minimum viable product definition, which is like, what's the minimum thing that I can put up there to throw against the wall? Well, if you throw something out there for your target audience and it's not viable, and you get a bunch of people saying they don't want to use it, you haven't learned anything, because you don't know whether they don't want to use it because you're not solving a critical problem that they have, or because you just didn't give them enough functionality to solve the problem that they have. And oftentimes, again, my experience, literally not just with startups, but with large companies trying to create like new product offerings, under obviously always resource constrained situations, because that's true for every company. I've seen it over and over again where teams throw out something that is not complete enough to be a viable solution for someone. And they learn nothing from the process. The whole point of a minimum viable product is to learn.
Right. And that's where you attach the price tag then to the minimum viable product to see if people want it, to have them put their money where their mouth is. Is that kind of how that fits into the
I
plan
think I
or
think first of all, there's probably a few steps. First of all, let's figure out if, you know, they'll even use it for free, a
Mm,
minimum viable product. And that might not be, oftentimes, you don't actually need to give them a real product. You can give them, here's the description of everything, what would be missing in that. But at some point, and it doesn't have to be, you can do this in any order. You do have to actually get money. There's Kickstarter out there, and that's a good way to test whether people are going to give you money without a product. Describe it, put it out there, and see if people give you money. If they really give you money in exchange for a product that's going to come 6 months later, that's a way to get the money first and then the minimum viable second. And you don't have to use Kickstarter, you can use your own website. Another option is to put the minimum viable product out there, make sure it's viable, and then before you launch it, start asking for money. Um, Either way, you're not going to get through what we call the launch wave until you've got both of those done.
right. Okay. Cool. Okay. So I have more questions that are more about your technical knowledge. So I feel like I want to
Mhm.
just pause that for a moment and get to know you, the human, better. You, Mona, what drives you? What are you passionate about? Why are you even taking time out of your extremely busy life to be on the Fempreneur podcast? Like, what are you all about?
Well, I'm on your podcast because I love Canadians, all things Canadian still. uh, I think I've got two different passions that collide. My sweet spot is scaling companies that have, as I say, already found their product market fit and helping them exit. As I said, I ran acquisitions at Cadence Design Systems, and I've been involved in acquisitions as an executive in a number of companies since. And I love helping companies grow and then find that happy place. One of the things that I'm passionate about within that space is that there is an awful lot of, again, I like debunking some myths that have been developed and have just taken over the world because they're the entrepreneurial world anyway, because they're provocative and, so they're clickbaity, but they're not really very good, honestly, advice for companies. And so one of the things that I'm passionate about is helping founders understand that they have many different paths to success, but when they go to raise investment from VCs and other investors, um, they have a tendency to think that their definition of success is what their investors' definition of success is. And investors really have one path to success, most investors, most venture capitalists. And that is because they play this portfolio play where, they'll invest in 20 companies, understanding that 19 of them will fail, or maybe, 17 of them will fail. Two of them will have some outcome that is, okay. And then one of them will be this massive unicorn and it'll make up for everything. That's like a brilliant strategy
Mhm,
for a portfolio play.
mhm,
But that means that they don't care about the 17 that fail.
mm.
Um, you must go big or you can fail. There's really very little in between for a VC. And I might be over exaggerating a little bit, but it is, getting close to really what their business model is like.
Right.
But that is completely different from these founders who might spend 10 years working on, like, killing themselves, working to build a company to a certain stage.
Mhm,
The chances of them all becoming unicorn or decacorn companies to deliver that value to a VC is like inconsequentially small. And
mhm,
so, how do they get money? How do they get what they want, whatever that definition of success is? If their only path is becoming that freestanding, successful, profitable, standalone company that maybe one day can go public, then they're talking about 0.3%. of the possible outcomes in the world. There is a huge possibility for them to build a strategy around getting acquired. It might not be what their VCs want, but they could actually potentially make more money. If they care about the technology, which most of them do, you can get that technology to continue living in a larger company if you do it right. Obviously, if you do it wrong, then there's a lot of stories about that doesn't happen. But if you do it right, that technology can continue. Employees that have helped you along the way will continue to have secure jobs. There's so much value in thinking about what you define as success instead of just adopting what your investors define as success. And I'm super passionate about that in that space. I've had a lot of great experience over my career. I ran corporate strategy for a company called User Testing, which was a San Francisco SaaS company. Now, we were one of the 0.3%. We came, when I joined, it was actually, I would call it a scale up already. It was at 40 million in revenue. The executive team took it to 140 million in revenue, allowing us to go public on the New York Stock Exchange. So that's a wonderful story. It's something I've experienced. You can tell when a company's got the metrics to be able to hit that, but that's not what the vast majority of experiences are. And honestly, later we ended up getting acquired anyway, and I helped negotiate the acquisition by Thoma Bravo for $1.3 billion. So that was a really fun experience. And
Wow.
as I told you, I've been, that's one extreme. I've been at a startup that failed. I've been at startups that have exited through an acquisition, and I've acquired a number of startups in these various operator roles. There should be a range of opportunities for companies to consider. And I think that that's partly why the book is so important to me, because it is how we avoid the mistakes that lead us down one path, where we don't have to have, whatever the number is. It's definitely greater than 50% of all startups that fail. We don't have to have that if we could just change, the general advice that we put out there in the world.
Yeah. Okay, so when you're talking about the book, you mean Sail to Scale, right? You said that's why the book is so important to you. Okay, so let's talk more about the book then specifically. How long has it been out in the world? What sparked it? How long did it take to bring it to life? Tell us about the two other co-authors.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book has been out there for not that long. We launched it in August of this year, so it's still fresh in market. Thank you. It took about a total of a year and a half from the time that we first imagined that this was something we wanted to do to the time it got out. We thought it would take a year. Like all startups, we were 6 months delayed in launching. It breaks the cycle of business into these 4 phases. As I said, we call them waves because these waves tend to come at you, and they can either crush your business or they can turn it into some exhilarating ride, depending on how you approach them. And so that's why we sort of use the wave analogy when we talk about it. So the 4 waves are the launch wave. We've spent most of our time so far talking about that. And that's, again, where you have to know that you achieve your product market fit first. And then if you aren't succeeding in that, you might hit a pivot wave where you have to pivot and figure out, what has to change. And so that's the second section of the book, is the pivot wave. And honestly, you don't have to pivot because the launch part didn't work. You could be scaling for a while and then realize that you have to pivot in order to keep growing. So the third part of the journey is the scale wave. And the scale wave could go on for as long as you want it to. Again, if you're heading towards an IPO, you're scaling forever. If you decide that you're going to get acquired, then you go into the 4th wave, which is the exit wave. And so those are the sections of the book. I feel like it felt very much like a startup to me, and that we came up with the idea. And then I think I was smart enough to realize that any good startup needs a series of founders with specific profiles to be able to round you out. And so that's why we ended up doing it in a group of three. Maria Fernandez Guajardo is an amazing product person. She's launched and created roadmaps for some of the most iconic products that you've heard about. You can just probably, I don't want to talk about them, but you can look up her LinkedIn profile and see what she's done. And so she wrote the launch part of the book because she has launched a number of products. And Heather Jurahayan has been a pivot expert. And so her latest pivot was coming into a company called Hitch, and that is a big story that we profile in the book, and turning it around and then selling it to ServiceNow, which is a multi tens of billions of dollars company. And so she actually has experience on the pivot and the exit. And as I said, my sweet spot is in the scaling and the exit. And so the three of us, I think, together created a great founding team
No kidding.
to be able to launch this.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't wait to read it. It's in my cart. I'm actually going to be living in Mexico for the winter. So I have books in my cart that once I get there, I will have them shipped to me there so that I have
Okay.
less luggage. But I'm super excited to read your book. And I wanted to read at least some of it before this interview, but that's my excuse. So,
That's
um,
perfectly fine. I'm giving
yeah,
you all the good tidbits in advance.
yes. And now I'm even like a million times more excited to read it. Okay. So this brings me to a couple of the juicier questions. So this one is, why is it crucial to develop exit strategies when you're starting a business?
Hmm. Yes, that is a thing I love to talk about because, you know, you can have founders or leaders who have either launched or been responsible for growing companies for the first time. And so that's their first time experience. You can have serial operators like me or my co authors who have done this in multiple different companies. And so you've experienced it a number of times. However, there's very few people that have experienced multiple exits. And so an exit tends to be a one-time thing for the vast majority of people, unless your job is corporate strategy and you're responsible for buying all of these companies, right? So for most leaders, operators, founders, CEOs, if they're heading towards an exit, this is their one. Um, you, if you're only going to do something once, you're probably not going to do it well. So you need some people around you to support you. Uh, what I have seen too many times is that companies and their leaders will view an exit, an acquisition, as a transaction. So what that means is they're going about, they're building product, they're selling product, they're finding customers, they're building product, they're selling product, they're finding customers. One of many things happens. Perhaps they start running out of money. Perhaps they aren't running out of money, but they just can't keep growing. And so they're sort of flatlining. Perhaps they're just tired and they can't find anybody else to take over the business. Who knows what happens? But one day they wake up and they say to themselves, geez, wouldn't it be great if like someone bought me now? So I have this theory in my head about 5 different companies that would be so lucky to have my business. I'm going to call up someone who is an acquisition advisor, an M&A advisor, and I'm going to see if I can sell my business. And they can deal with it like a transaction. It's literally like waking up one morning and saying, okay, now I've got a product. I've got in my head like 100 customers that I'm confident will buy this product. So having not talked to anybody or gotten any sort of feedback before, I'm going to hire a salesperson, and I expect that within 6 months, they will all have bought my product. It's exactly the same thing, but nobody ever looks at it that way. Everybody just assumes that when they're ready, even, and usually they're only ready when things are going poorly. So things are going poorly and they're ready, someone's going to come up and buy their company, and all I have to do is hire an expert to help me go and do it. And that's like literally the worst way to prepare for a number of options that you could take for all the hard work that you've put into your business. So what I say, and I've been saying for years, is you've got to start treating acquisitions as a strategy, not as a transaction. And what does that mean? You wouldn't start a company without having a strategy of how you're going to enter the market and, make sure that you get customers and how you're going to position yourself. You would develop that strategy. You wouldn't just enter the market and then hope for the best. At the same time as you're doing that, you need to build out a strategy for how you're going to increase the options for people getting interested in acquiring you. You never have to take them.
Mhm.
So if someone comes because you've done a really good job of the strategy and they come knocking on your door, you can always say no. But if nobody ever knocks on your door and then you decide someone wants to, I mean, it's not the best position to be in. And so being able to, from the early stages, think about what that looks like. And we do spend an awful lot of time talking about what that looks like in the book. Is something that very, very, very few founders, leaders, operators spend time on. And they just limit their options. That's all that they're doing by not spending time on it.
Okay. So even if they don't do it at the very beginning, it's better to at least have a plan or build a plan, work with someone like you to create the plan before they start calling up potential buyers saying, "Hey, I'm thinking of selling my business."
Yeah, and again, if you, I sometimes describe it as dating in so many ways. It's like very much like dating. You don't call up someone and say, I've been thinking about it. I've been looking, I've been reading about you, Lindsay, and I've decided that it would be fantastic if you got together with me. Let's become, partners. And the reason why is because I really think you can help make me more successful. So wouldn't that be fabulous if the two of us got together? And that's literally what people do. They say, here's my business, and all I need is a large sales team, and we'll be able to sell more, and it'll be much more profitable as a result. You have the sales team, Mr. Large Company.
Yeah,
So if we got together, you could just sell my product through your sales team. Wouldn't that be fabulous? And
yeah,
that's like literally not what any companies that's got a large sales team is thinking about. They're like, how can I get my sales team to sell more of my product? Will you help me sell more of my product? How would you do that?
right. Okay. Yeah, entrepreneurs do have a tendency to have tunnel vision. Sounds like, based on your experience, and I've definitely seen that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not their fault because we spent the entire time in all the literature telling them that their job is to get customers and their job is to get customers. But when that fails, their job is, you would think, not to just wind up the company, but to get acquired
Yeah.
if they still have technology that's valuable to someone.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Now let's talk about the fundamental startup steps. And of course, one of them you're saying is to plan the exit or exit options, like before you get too far along in the business, ideally. But what would be some of the other startup steps that people may be assuming that tech has changed, or because of tech advancements, now they can do this startup step differently, or like talk. Does that make sense? I think that question was on your list. At least that's how it made sense to me.
I think that, so there's lots of different things that companies might run into because of technology changes. Um, but what I've been mostly focused on are the things that haven't changed, even if the technology world has changed around you. So just because Gen AI is all the thing now, and everybody's trying to say that they've got Gen AI in their product somewhere and somehow, that's fantastic. And it's probably driving a lot of very specific challenges that companies have to overcome.
Mhm.
But the 18 mistakes that we talk about in the book, um, are still going to be the same mistakes,
Okay.
regardless of that. Maybe one day it'll all change, but right now they're still the same mistakes. So, so for example, when we talk about I'll give you a very specific example. We talk about, for example, that when it's not going well, you have to start thinking about a pivot, right? And one of the mistakes, like let's say you're pivoting because your lunch is getting eaten by Gen AI solutions out there. And so you're going to try and adopt Gen AI into your business. You could do that, and that's fine. But one of the mistakes that people often make, and this is again at the very top level an assumption problem, is that these are people who have, again, been embedded with their current technology for years now, and they're too attached to their current roadmap to pivot effectively. They love what they're currently building, and it doesn't, all they're trying to do is sprinkle some of the new stuff on top of it instead of really looking at it holistically and saying, what's my core differentiation and how can I reposition that for the best pivot possible?
Mhm.
And so again, what I'm trying to explain is that it's regardless of the newness that, that might be changing in the world, there's just some fundamental things about building a business.
Mhm.
And there's some fundamental things about being human. And sometimes we have to overcome that human in order to build a business well.
Right, right. So you said there's about 18 things, common mistakes that you talk about in the book that
Mhm.
haven't changed because of tech advancements. Are any of those around hiring or promoting people higher up in the company? Could you give us a couple more examples of things that haven't changed
Yeah.
because of tech?
Yeah. So again, I think what's really important is to think about, let's use hiring as an example, um, as what you need to do depending on the stage you are in these four stages. Because who you hire and how you hire in a launch wave is very, very different from who you hire, how you hire, and how you manage if you're scaling, if you're a scale up at this point. And so when you think about the launch wave, you think very much about um, sort of what I was describing when we were launching our book. You want to create the right founding team, and you have to make sure that you're picking people that are complementary to you because you don't know everything. One of the things that I've been toying around with lately, and I'll probably write something about this soon, is we've got this, again, it's the media that makes us think this way, but we've got this like hero complex where, the media will identify the one person, the CEO, Sam Altman, or whomever, and they single-handedly did it all by themselves, and everything that you hear about is just this one person. I mean, there's like maybe 700 people in the organization, but it all sounds like one person has done it all,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so we do tend to internalize that, I guess, and believe that it depends on who you are. You might be the founder that suddenly has the hero complex and thinks that they can do it all themselves. And we've all experienced met someone like that. Plus, there's stories in the news about when that goes bad. Um, so coming up with the right team, and in the book we talk about what you should care about and what you should not care about when you're looking for that founding team, right? And so, do you care about, for example, that they're passionate about the problem? Yes, because 10 years, right? Do you care that they have a great resume from, a bunch of other branded companies? No, because you can have a role in a very large company that seems really awesome on paper, but you might be in what in the press is called an optimizer, meaning what you're doing is you're optimizing for everything that is running in the company, but you're not building anything new. And you really have to be a builder in this launch wave. You have to be more of a generalist. You have to, decide that you're going to learn whatever you need to learn to get something done from here or there.
Mhm.
Get to the scale wave section, and it's like almost literally the opposite. And the hardest part for a CEO that is going from launch to scale is learning how to do everything different. So everything that we just finished telling you in the launch wave that you should do, stop that, because now you're moving from being a founder to being a leader, and people will like not realize that they have to make that shift. It's like firing yourself and then hiring yourself into a new role. And I don't think there's enough leaders who are thinking about that shift that has to happen when that occurs. Then you do have to get what we call specialists instead of generalists, because now things are more complex. The entire business of the company is getting more complex, and so you can't be 60% right at everything. You have to be somewhere between 80 and 90% right at most things, right? And as you bring in these specialists, you have all of these people who have been with you along the way, who now are getting sort of, their responsibilities are getting taken away from them by these specialists, right? And their responsibilities are getting narrower and narrower. And so now you've got what we describe in the book as you have the old guard versus the new guard. And if you don't manage the relationship between them, then you have like a rift within the company, sort of like we have a rift within our country right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of things that change as you're starting to lead a scale up versus leading a startup.
Okay. I'm coming up with our podcast title right now.
I love it.
Yeah, I've got some good stuff. All right, cool. Okay, now I want to ask you what you would tell your 10-year younger self. It could be about life, business, all of the above.
Oh my goodness. What I would tell my 10-year younger self. Well, a few things. I think, first of all, I would say that, when I was younger, I felt like whatever I was experiencing at the moment was essentially what was going to experience in life. And what I've learned is that everything is a phase. And so it's really easy to, I talk to a lot of younger women, and they say things like, well, I'm not sure if I want this job. It sounds like a lot of heavy responsibility. I've got 2 kids at home. I'm like, your kids will grow up. And I thought about it the same way. And so I understand the perspective, but everything is a phase. And so just because this is how you feel now, it doesn't mean that that's how you're going to feel, 3 years from now. Things around you will change. The entire environment will change. The technology will change. Everything will change. Mm-hmm. The one thing you can count on is change. And so I would have told my younger self that, just you can power through a lot of things for a year, then see how it looks like. And then if it hasn't changed, then that's fine. You can make a decision then, but you don't have to sort of look at it as, oh my God, this is how it's going to be for the next 12 years. Yeah. And I don't think I can handle that for 12 years. I think that that's one big takeaway. Another big takeaway, you asked me about my 2 big passions, and I spent a lot of time talking about startups. But my other really big passion is about getting women to spend more time being visible in the broad-based public media. And so I would describe this as most of us really work very hard, and most women I meet are exceptional at their jobs or whatever role they've decided to, take on. But it's all about that job. And the story that I tell is that there was an experience I had where I was in a boardroom, and one of the board members had suggested that they go and find a person who happened to be a man, to help the company with something. And when it was asked, well, where does the man work right now? The board member's like, I don't know. He might be like moving around or whatever, but he is the best person for this thing. And I was thinking about it at the time because I had this awesome title at this large public company, and everybody wanted to talk to me, but they wanted to talk to me because of my title at the public company. And the moment I left, like, none of those people wanted to talk to me again. And so what's critically important, and I see this, these these people in strategic positions, they tend to know these men and what they're known for much more than any woman and what they're known for. So we as women have to get our voices heard more out there in the public zeitgeist.
Mhm.
And I don't think we do that enough. We're heads down working really hard within whatever job we're working in. And being recognized very well within that small space, but unfortunately reliant too much on the authority that someone bestows upon us instead of the authority we develop ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that attaching yourself to a large company can be a blessing and a curse, and for me, this is I was literally writing about this earlier, and I was building a presentation for a workshop I'm leading on Friday, but I was telling the story about how when I was a brand new financial advisor, working for Edward Jones Investments, having that name attached to my name was so amazing. It helped me so much, right? But
Platform,
then
great platform. Yep.
right? And then as I came into this phase of realizing it wasn't a good fit for me and started developing relationships with people who used to work for Edward Jones and now work for different firms, one of them said to me, he said, be really careful about branding yourself as that company because I don't see you staying with that company forever. And I was like, well, what should I do? Right. Like I was having a hard time marketing myself online because you had to, of course, submit all of your marketing ideas to the higher ups and it had to be approved and things like
Exactly. Yep. And they limit your ability to actually market yourself.
yeah, and so I was like, "How am I gonna brand myself as myself?" And he was like, "You'll figure it out." He's like, "It's even in just the way you speak to your clients right now." He's like, "You can't continually, sell them on this company. You need to sell them on you." And I was like, "Oh, I can do that with my existing clients and even with prospects that I haven't landed yet and things like that." But yeah, I remember the shift of coming away from that company and immediately being like, okay, I was there the perfect amount of time. I had that name attached to mine for the perfect amount of time. Now I've ditched like the shackles of marketing constraints and now I can just do all the things and it was just so interesting how the universe timed everything so perfectly for me even though at the time like you said I didn't recognize that it was a phase and that it wasn't always going to be that hard but yeah so I just wanted to share that story because it really
That's awesome. And this is not something I learned when I was younger, 10 years ago at all. This is something that, I've developed over the last decade, and really understood. And so if we all learn it a little earlier in our lives, it would be better for all of us.
right, and you're a perfect example, like your website, it's your first name, last name.com, and that's one of the things that I've been teaching women ever since I started my marketing school 5.5 years ago. It's buy your name domain. You don't maybe need it right now, but one day you're
Exactly.
gonna write a book.
Just keep it.
One day you're gonna be, out there doing something that's you. So yeah, be the brand, be the smart person, be the expert, even if your expertise, shifts into different industries, it doesn't matter. Like yeah, just developing and even just like SEO wise, developing that, that level of SEO that's under your name. And
That's
I
right.
changed the spelling of my first name, like my mom spelled my name Lindsay. And when I decided that I was going to be, some sort of big deal entrepreneur, I didn't really know what that was going to look like yet. I changed the spelling of my first name so that I was like Google my first name. Guess who comes up, right? Like I
Brilliant. I love that. I'm going to take that away as a great piece of advice. I love that. Good
yeah,
marketing.
yeah, and so my mom's still a little upset about it, but she's starting to understand now. But anyway, um, so Mona, what kind of people do you want to work with? What kind of clients are you looking for? What kind of ways do you want to fill your calendar? Like, how can we, bring more of the right people into your world? And what's your business going to look like a year or 3 years from now? It's a lot of questions, but
Well, so I am still an operator at a company.
yeah,
I spend a lot of time doing advisory work for startups. My dance card is a little full right now for advisory work for startups, but I'm always interested in meeting new startups that, again, what I've learned over the long time that I've been doing this is my expertise is startups with product in market already,
okay.
um, and that have gotten to the point where they believe they've got product market fit of some sort. It doesn't have to be full on, but getting really close to that.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people including my co-author Maria, who are amazing, at helping people get their product market fit. My sweet spot is like taking it from that point and saying, okay, well, now how are you going to grow? What are the strategies for growth? And so always love to hear from companies that are at that point. I'm incredibly passionate about trying to get the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Canada to be stronger, more vibrant. I think there's a lot of great small startups, but we need to scale them all up. That's what we need to do. And so again, Canadian products and market, amazing. That's what I'd love to see. But again, not to work with, these are just advisory roles. And then, just trying to get more women who are one of my goals that I just recently announced is I want to get 100 women to publish business books. And I don't know how long that will take me, but if anybody wants some advice, I'm happy to give it to them. And then I'm going to put them on my list. And if they publish a book, then I'll get closer to 100.
Yes, fantastic. I love that. That is so cool. I don't know if you know this, but my most recent book, which I just published the beginning of this year, is called It's Time to Write Your Damn Book, Woman.
I love that. I'm definitely buying that book.
It's the 4-month guide to writing and self-publishing your own book. And it's the 6th book that I've written because, similar to you, I am 100% passionate about helping women write their own books. And similar to what, that advice that I received, a long time ago, it was like, be the expert. You be the brand. Don't always try to attach your name to other people and other companies. Like, you be the expert. And then I went and hired a business coach a couple years later, specifically because he'd written books, and his business coaching sort of plan was all around getting you not published, but getting you to be a published author, not from a big publishing house, which is getting a book out there. And yeah, it's a life-changing experience. So I think that your mission to help 100 women write books is so amazing, and I would love to get behind that in any way that I can. So
awesome. Well, let's make that happen together.
Let's do it. All right. So get in touch with Mona if you want a little bit of advice about writing your book, if you have a company that you would like to scale and you would like to talk to her about maybe how she can help you do that. And Mona, is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with before we hop off?
Just that I think that, it's everybody can achieve what they want to achieve if they decide that they're going to lead with their own personal brand, which is something that I know, talk about quite a lot, and then develop that over time. What we all have to do is expand our own personal influence, as opposed to investing and expanding the influence of others. Now, friends, all for it, but companies, they're not charities. We don't need to do that very much. So that's my big takeaway from years of experience.
Agreed. Love it. All right. So grab Mona's book on Amazon. It is called Sail to Scale, SAIL to Scale. And it is just, I'm just so excited to read it. So, thank you so much, Mona. I really appreciate you taking the time to share so much wisdom. I can't wait to listen to this probably on Friday when I'm driving to my workshop. I'm going to share a couple of the things that you've shared with my audience, because I know that the way you've explained it is just mind-blowingly powerful yet simple, and I've never heard it explained like that before. So thank you so much.
Love that. Thank you for inviting me. It's been fun.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.